SWOT Your Life, From Corporate Strategy to Personal Mastery by Walter Freeman, Chapter 8, Wealth Waves. The Strategy of Family Finance. Money is the topic everyone lies about. Not with malicious intent. We lie to ourselves, calling expenses investments. We lie to each other, pretending we're fine when we're drowning. We lie by omission, avoiding the numbers entirely because knowing would require action. The result is that most people have only a vague sense of their financial reality. They know roughly what they earn and roughly what they spend. They have some sense of their debts and their savings, but they couldn't tell you with precision where their money goes, what it's building, or what risks they're carrying. This vagueness isn't neutral, it's expensive. Every financial mistake you make from ignorance, the debt you carry longer than necessary, the opportunities you miss, the threats you don't prepare for, costs you money you could have kept. This chapter is about replacing vagueness with vision and vision with strategy. The couple who stopped arguing about money. Javier and Sofia fought about money constantly. Not about the big things. They agreed on those. They both wanted financial security, wanted their kids to go to good schools, wanted to retire someday. They fought about the small things, the daily decisions that somehow escalated into referendums on each other's values. He thought she spent too much on her appearance. She thought he spent too much on electronics. He thought she was too anxious about money. She thought he was too careless. Every purchase became a battlefield. When they finally mapped their finances together, they discovered they'd been fighting about symptoms while ignoring causes. Strengths. They both had stable incomes that together put them solidly in the middle class. They had no high-interest credit card debt. They owned their car outright. Sofia had a talent for finding deals that stretched their money. Javier had solid technical skills that could generate side income. And despite the fights, they were both fundamentally oriented toward building rather than spending. Weaknesses. They had never created an explicit budget, so they had no shared framework for spending decisions. They carried $50,000 in student loan debt that was quietly eating interest every month. Their income varied with Javier's freelance work, but their spending didn't adjust to match. They had only 1 month of emergency savings, which created constant background anxiety. And they made financial decisions reactively, fighting about purchases after they were made rather than agreeing on a plan beforehand. Opportunities. Interest rates on student loans had dropped, and refinancing could save them thousands. Several apps could automate investing the way they'd automated nothing. Both of their employers offered matching 401k contributions that neither was maximizing. Literally free money they weren't taking. Sofia's deal-finding skill could be systematized, and Javier's freelance income could be specifically directed to debt reduction rather than absorbed into general spending. Threats. Without an emergency fund, one car breakdown or medical bill could spiral into high-interest debt. The student loans would follow them for decades at their current payment rate. Their retirement savings were far behind where they should be for their age, and the constant money fights were eroding their marriage. The map revealed the core issue. They were managing money reactively, without a system, and then blaming each other for the chaos that created. They built a system. They refinanced the student loans, cutting their interest rate nearly in half. They created a budget with explicit categories for the discretionary spending they'd been fighting about. Her appearance category, his electronics category, each funded with an agreed amount that was theirs to spend without justification. They automated transfers to savings and retirement before the money hit their checking account. And they directed all of Javier's freelance income to the student loan until it was dead. The fights didn't stop immediately. Old habits die hard. But they now had a framework for resolving disagreements that didn't require either person to be wrong. Is this in the budget? Became a question with an objective answer, not a moral judgment. 3 years later, the student loan was paid off. They had 6 months of emergency savings, their retirement accounts were finally growing, and they almost never fought about money anymore. The system had made peace possible. The retirement that almost wasn't. Margaret and David were 62 years old when they realized they might not be able to retire. They'd always assumed it would work out. They'd earned good salaries, lived in a nice house, sent their kids to college. They'd contributed to their retirement accounts when they remembered to. They'd figured that by the time they needed the money, There would be enough. Then David's company offered an early retirement package, and they actually looked at the numbers. They had maybe half of what they'd need. The shock of that discovery could have been paralyzing. Instead, they decided to approach it strategically. Strength. They owned their home with only a small mortgage remaining. They had good health, which meant lower medical costs and the ability to work longer if needed. Margaret's skills as a former accountant could translate into part-time consulting work. They had a paid-off vacation property that was sitting unused most of the year. And they'd raised independent children who wouldn't need financial support. Weaknesses. They'd undersaved throughout their careers, always prioritizing present consumption over future security. Their investment portfolio was poorly diversified, too much in their former employer's stock, which had underperformed. They had lifestyle expenses that assumed incomes they wouldn't have in retirement. And they'd never explicitly discussed what retirement would look like, so they had no shared vision for what they were preparing for. Opportunities. The vacation property could be rented for significant income. Tax-advantaged catch-up contributions were available for people over 50, and they weren't using them. Downsizing their house could free up substantial equity. Margaret's consulting could provide income without requiring full-time work. And 3 more years of working would dramatically improve their projections. Threats. Health could change at any time at their age, eliminating the working longer option. Market downturns could devastate their inadequate cushion. The vacation property was in an area vulnerable to climate impacts. And every year they delayed addressing this, their options narrowed. The map showed them a path. It wasn't the retirement they'd imagined in their 30s, leisurely travel starting at 62. But it was a retirement they could actually afford. They listed the vacation property on rental platforms and discovered it could generate substantial income during peak seasons. They met with a financial advisor who rebalanced their portfolio toward more stable investments. They maxed out their catch-up contributions, living leaner for a few years to make it possible. And David negotiated to stay at his company for 3 more years rather than taking the early package. At 65, they retired. Not extravagantly, but comfortably. The rental property provided income. Their rebalanced investments had grown. They'd built what they needed by finally looking clearly at what they had. Your financial SWOT. Money is uncomfortable to examine, which is exactly why examining it is so valuable. For strengths, consider: what financial assets do you have? What skills could generate income? What financial habits serve you well? What resources do you have access to that you might not be fully using? What have you built that gives you security? For weaknesses, consider: where does money leak out of your life? What debts are costing you? What are you not doing that you know you should? Saving, investing, insuring. What conversations about money are you avoiding? What don't you actually know about your financial situation that you should? For opportunities, consider: what resources could you leverage more effectively? What could you learn that would help? What changes to your situation might improve things? What opportunities are you leaving on the table? Employer matches, refinancing, tax advantages. For threats, consider: what could go wrong that you're not prepared for? What happens if your income stops unexpectedly? What risks are you carrying that might materialize? What's unsustainable about your current trajectory? Look at your financial situation in writing, with actual numbers, perhaps for the first time. The clarity might be uncomfortable. It's also the beginning of taking control.